everyone. My name is Jordan, and I want to welcome you to the first official Author Diaries. Typically, I am somebody who likes to release my podcast episodes on Sundays, which you will still be able to find. That will be taking up space with Jordan. It'll still be all in one platform, except for we're doing a little schedule change. We're doing a little content change. Wednesdays going forward are going to be the Author Diaries. And Sundays will be the actual podcast episode. The reason why I'm doing this is because I realized I liked really talking about writing and reading and doing and anything that comes with that. I really was informed by that, by talking about the realities of writing a self-published book and then publishing that. I released that episode, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago. And then I kind of disappeared from the internet because, well, listen to the episode coming out this Sunday and you'll figure out why. But I really wanted to kind of separate the two into two different buckets for myself because A, I think it's good for my brain, and B, I just also really wanted to talk about writing, and I don't want to be doing that every single podcast episode. So without further ado, welcome to the Author Diaries number 1. So this summer, what am I writing? I'm so happy you asked. Oh my, you're too kind. You guys like listening to me. Thank you. But yeah, this summer, I'm actually writing 2 books. I released All Parts of Me, book 1, just this past April. I think for my first ever self-published book, I think she's pretty cute. You can let me know. You could even check her out on Amazon and on my website. And soon, a paperback copy, which will be really cool for me. But I also have this vision of it being a trilogy. If you read the story, you'll find out that there's 3 kind of central women to the book. There is our first character, Lila Williams. She is the female protagonist, who is kind of just like, she's built this life for herself, but there's just still so much that she's not reaching for. There's still so much she's not confident in herself. She thinks that she has kind of lost that need or that want for love, and she finds out that actually she still wants to feel needed and feel loved. It is a story. It is a slow burn romance. So if you're not into that thing, that's okay. Because guess what? Book 2 is not slow burn. Not at all. Not even a little bit. I mean, I think a little bit of the romance comes in more to play like in the first third of the book. Whereas in the first book, it comes, I think, way later than what a lot of people would like. But that's the difference between a slow burn and a not slow burn. And so in writing book 2, I also kind of started dabbling into my first and foremost true love, which is fantasy. I have been a fantasy girl. I think some of my first books that I can remember are like the Warriors series, Harry Potter, Twilight, the Aragon series, just all of those types of books, Magic Treehouse even, all of those books have always been something that I would have wanted to write. Obviously, I'm an adult now and I have learned to appreciate the arc of smut and I really enjoy fantastical romances. And so I have been writing 2 books. So the first book is the second book to All Parts of Me. And the second book is this new fantasy book, which will be coming way, way later because there is a lot of things that I am learning that are very different about writing fantasy versus just writing a contemporary romance. And that's actually a good segue into the next thing I want to talk about, which is that, so book 2 is 100% a fantasy book. There is nothing about it that is like the modern world I'm sure there's going to be some things, but to a certain extent, it happens in its own land. It has its own rules. And I am learning that when you are the author that is creating these worlds and these creatures and these languages and, races and creatures and all these things, that you have to remember all of that stuff. Like, you can't just be like, I don't know, it's just this random creature that I created suddenly. I mean, you can do it to a certain extent, but like, you have to remember that you did that. There is so much more plot that has to happen. And there is so much more world building that I will never, ever complain ever again about going through this much of world building in a fantasy book, because I think you genuinely need it. As I've been writing this very rough, very, very rough first draft, I'm like, the trees were large. Girl, you got to describe the forest. You have to describe why the forest is so creepy. You have to describe why this thing happens or that thing happens, because it plays into the actual world building itself. And it is just as important as the character development. It is just important as the dialogue and the romance scenes and tension building. Because when you are building a fantasy novel, there is a lot of components that layer on top of each other. You can use the world building as a way to kind of showcase the character's emotions. You can reveal a lot more to the audience than you telling it through the eyes of your character or telling it through your character's thoughts or the dialogue that they're having with the other characters within the scene. And I think that's why world building has become so important. And that's why I'm taking my time with this book. My plan is to release it in, I want to say, October of next year. That's the plan. That's the goal, because it is in its very rough drafts, but I'm very excited for the storyline. Like I said, I've always wanted to write fantasy. I used to be the type of person that would fill journals and journals and journals of just stories after stories after stories. And just to finally be able to be at that point in my life where I am writing, even if it still is self publishing, I'm still so excited that I get to do this and get to have this as part of my journey, and honestly kind of take life by the horns or whatever they say, and just do it in the way that feels good to me. I cannot imagine right now being able to, give an editor or an agent 300 pages or whatever by next week. And the reason why is because I'm still working a full time job. I have bills to pay. I have dogs that need to be walked. I have a social life. And it's one of the things that I'm really battling with over this summer. As I'm writing two books, I need to make sure that I'm not getting distracted by this fantasy one, which I am very much really, really wanting to write because it is the one that, is striking my interest the most. It's something that I've always wanted to write. But I did start this project of the Parts of Me series, with book one having come out in April. And I've promised myself that book two will be coming out in October, as well as releasing the paperback version of book one. So there's a lot of distractions when it comes to writing this summer. I have a lot of things coming up, and, it's crazy of me to be like, I'm going to write two books this summer. It's more like I'm going to write one, like half of the other. Because if you've ever written a book, if you've ever tried to sit down and write something, about 98% of the book is going to be changed by the time you finish it. The amount of versions that All Parts of Me book one had is insane. I was looking at them earlier because I printed out most of them, or at least printed out chapters of them, and it's just red line, red line, red line, red line after red line. And so, a lot of it doesn't make it into the final version, but you still got to write it to get done. Some of the writing challenges that I've been having with these next two books. The first of them being, there is a lot more pressure on myself for book two. And the reason why is because the foundation is already there. I feel like building the foundation of being a writer was really difficult, but now I have to build the house on top of the foundation. And if I do it incorrectly, or if it's not as good as the first one, or it's not as deep, or it's not as emotional, because I feel like book one was incredibly emotional. It has a lot of my own, past traumas and stuff woven all throughout it. And so thinking about book two, I wanted it to be a little bit more fun. I wanted it to be a little bit more, a flirtier, a sassier, even sexier version of book one. But it also needs to stand on its own, because none of these books have to be read in order. I think you'll get spoilers if you don't. But it's just there's more pressure. And I'm really trying to work through that, because it is 100% all in my own head, but it's still something that I have to work through and work on. The other part of this is it's summertime. And in the Pacific Northwest, that means every sunny day you need to be outside. You need to be doing, it's just the rule of the Pacific Northwest is when it's nice out, you have to be outside, because the other times of the year it's gray, it's cloudy, and it's gross. So I have to find a way to balance a lot of that like social activity that I want to be doing, and all the hiking and summer adventures that I want to be having. And so recently I kind of kicked it off with went camping this past May, and I think right before Memorial Day or right after Memorial Day weekend. And I actually took my laptop with me because if you've ever been camping, you do actually end up having a lot of downtime. And so I decided that because I wouldn't have the internet, wouldn't have access to it, I would just use that time to write, even if it was only 35, 40 minutes. And I was excited to be able to do that because it was just me being able to immerse myself in the Pacific Northwest nature without that many distractions. And no, there's no TikTok, there's no YouTube to be watched or anything. And so I wrote. It is finding little ways to incorporate even just 30 minutes of writing time each day, if not more, honestly, if I can get to that point. And also balancing having a full time job now. When I first wrote, I have to keep reminding myself when I wrote book one, I was unemployed. I didn't have a job. And so I had a lot more time. I could write from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. and it'd be no issue. Can't necessarily do that when you have a full time job on a random Tuesday. You have to go to the office, you have to do lists, you have OKRs and things like that that you have to finish. And so I think that's kind of also blending into why, and I'll talk about this more in the actual podcast. It's a little bit of feeling like a fraud going on. Like I still can't call myself an author, a published author, even though I am a published author, even if I'm the one who published my book. It wasn't a traditional publishing house, but I'm working through that and you can hear more about that in this Sunday's episode. But man, the plan is for Parts of Me Book 2. I don't have the actual title of it that I'm ready to release yet and still playing around with some words. But that is going to be coming out this October 2026. So I'm really excited to continue to share kind of like what I'm learning as I'm writing this book too, how I'm working through things, how I'm doing things differently. I think next week I do want to kind of talk about the self-publishing process and what I did the first time and what I'm doing differently. But let me know if you want to hear more about the fantasy book or if you want to keep listening to me talk about my contemporary romance. I want to know. And let me know how you liked Jordan's writing corner. I'm really excited for it. And I think this is going to bring some life back into myself and give me the opportunity and the outlet to kind of talk about something that brings me a lot of joy and a lot of passion without it overwhelming the rest of the podcast. So, kisses.